Right now, microscopic race cars are shooting bursts of electricity down your spine at up to 260 miles per hour.
Yeah, which is just wild to think about.
It really is. And they are doing that just so you can, keep your head upright while you're listening to this.
It's true. I mean, we really tend to view our own bodies through this very simplified lens.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you decide you want to reach for a glass of water and your arm simply extends, or you want to stand up from your chair and you just rise.
Mm.
We experience movement as this singular, instantaneous event.
Which is an incredible illusion.
Yeah,
So our mission today in this deep dive is to completely shatter that illusion.
that's right.
We are exploring a really fascinating set of anatomical notes presented by Dr. Delong in Kinexa. These sources map out the neuromotor loop.
Down to the smallest details.
Exactly. They allow us to trace the millimeter by millimeter journey of a single conscious thought turning into a complex physical action. We're going to look at something as seemingly basic as taking a step or, as beautifully intricate as a dancer holding a high precision pose.
And to really grasp what Dr. DeLong and Kinexa are presenting, we have to start with a core premise.
Okay, lay it on us.
Moving a muscle isn't just a matter of the brain sending a basic go command. It's actually a wildly complex, continuous loop of planning, executing, receiving live feedback, and correcting.
All happening in fractions of a second. Right?
Exactly, fractions of a second.
Okay, let's unpack this because the journey of a single movement starts at the very top, in the outer layer of your brain, the cerebral cortex.
Command center.
Right. But instead of looking at this like a generic command center, I like to picture the brain's motor system as like a commercial airline flight.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, so you have the pilot, which is your premotor cortex, and your supplementary motor area. They set the destination. They decide, we are going to lift the right leg to exactly 90 degrees.
They're programming the route.
Exactly. But the pilot isn't manually turning the flaps on the wings. They hand that flight plan over to the autopilot system, the primary motor cortex, specifically Brodmann Area 4, and that generates the actual nerve signal.
And what's fascinating here is that if that autopilot system, the primary motor cortex, sent its raw signal straight down into your leg muscles, it would be a complete disaster.
Wait, really? Why would it be a disaster if the pilot already set the exact destination?
Because a raw motor command lacks refinement. It's messy. Before that electrical impulse is allowed to leave the brain, it has to be filtered. So the brain essentially creates a carbon copy of the motor plan and sends it to two major quality control departments.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, it goes to the cerebellum. The cerebellum receives the intended plan, but it's also getting a live feed of what your body is currently doing in physical space.
Like a status report.
Yeah, exactly. It calculates the difference between where your leg is and where you want it to be and corrects the trajectory in real time to make the movement fluid.
So it's actively smoothing out the math before the movement even really happens.
It is. And simultaneously, the signal passes through the basal ganglia. The sources describe the basal ganglia's job as actively selecting the exact movement you want while ruthlessly suppressing what they call parasite movements.
Parasite movements. That sounds intense.
Right. They're basically unwanted extra muscle twitches that naturally occur when a raw signal is generated.
Oh, man. That makes so much sense. So if you're reaching across your desk to pick up a mug of hot coffee and your hand is perfectly steady as you bring it to your mouth, no shaking, no spilled coffee, you basically have your basal ganglia and cerebellum to thank for filtering out the noise.
Precisely. They are essentially an incredibly sophisticated noise-canceling system for your physical intentions.
That's amazing.
They refine a rough intention into a clean, actionable blueprint. And only then is the signal allowed to proceed down the descending control circuit, which is also known as the pyramidal tract.
So we have our perfectly refined blueprint. But, a perfect plan sitting inside your skull doesn't do a leg trapped on the floor any good. The signal has to get out.
Yeah, it's a travel.
Right. And as I was reading through the text, tracing this signal down through the brainstem, I hit this anatomical quirk that completely paused my reading.
The decussation.
Yes. The signal travels down, hits a specific point called the lower medulla oblongata, and then it just crosses over to the other side of the body. The crossroads. I mean, why does the left side of my brain control the right side of my body?
It is actually one of the most famous and debated quirks in human anatomy. At that specific crossroad in the brainstem, About 85% of the nerve fibers physically cross the midline of your body.
Which means the left hemisphere's command crosses over to the right side of the spinal cord and vice versa. But from a purely engineering perspective, I mean, that seems needlessly complicated. Is there a mechanical advantage to this crossover, or is it just like a biological accident?
Well, evolutionary biologists and neuroscientists have actually argued over this for decades. One of the leading theories goes all the way back to the evolution of early vertebrates.
Okay, how far back are we talking?
We're talking ancient oceans, when our ancestors were essentially primitive fish. For a fish to swim rapidly and escape a predator, it needs a contralateral reflex.
Contralateral reflex?
Yeah, if a predator strikes the left side of the fish needs its sensory system on the left to immediately trigger the muscles on the right side of its body to contract, pulling it away from the danger.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. So a threat on the left needs an instant contraction on the right to bend the body away in a C shape.
Which means the wiring physically had to cross the midline to make that escape reflex as fast as possible.
So it's hardwired for survival.
Exactly. And as vertebrates evolved limbs and walked onto land and eventually evolved into humans, that fundamental crisscross wiring just remained. We basically built a highly complex mammalian brain on top of an ancient crossed-over chassis.
That is incredible. We are carrying around the survival mechanics of ancient fish in our brainstems.
We really are.
So, okay, our perfectly refined signal has survived the crossover. It is now shooting down the main highway of the spinal cord, the lateral corticospinal tract, and it has to exit at a specific off-ramp.
Right, it needs to reach the target.
For the leg muscles we're tracking, the sources note the signal travels down to the lower back, specifically the L2 to L4 vertebral levels.
This is a crucial relay point. The upper motor neuron, the one that originated all the way up in the cortex, finally ends here.
It passes the baton.
Yes, it transfers its electrical signal to a second neuron, the lower motor neuron, located in the spinal cord.
And the statistics the sources provide on this specific lower motor neuron are just staggering.
They really are.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This signal jumps onto the peripheral nervous system, traveling down the femoral nerve toward the leg via specialized type A alpha fibers. These are the microscopic race cars I mentioned at the very beginning of the deep dive. How fast is this transmission?
We are talking velocities of 70 to 120 meters per second.
Over 260 miles per hour. That speed is hard to even conceptualize inside a human body.
Well, the sheer velocity is a biological necessity. Think about it. Imagine a dancer leaping into the air, or even just you stumbling on a crack in the sidewalk. Your body doesn't have the luxury of a slow internet connection.
Right, you just fall on your face.
Exactly. The motor neuron handling this, the alpha motor neuron, which originates in rect's lamina IX of the spinal cord, is the thickest, fastest type of nerve fiber we possess. It's designed specifically to ensure force is transmitted instantly to catch your weight.
Okay, so the electrical signal has successfully rocketed down the femoral nerve at 120 meters per second. It has reached the leg muscles, the vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, and rectus femoris, the quadriceps.
The final destination.
But this is where I really need you to break things down. Because electricity flying down a nerve is one thing, but electricity alone doesn't bend a knee. Muscles aren't made of copper wiring.
No, they're biological tissue.
Right. So how does a literal spark of electricity make meat move?
So we've reached the motor end plate. This is the exact junction where the physical nerve fiber meets the target muscle. And you've hit on the most critical transition here.
The nerve doesn't physically push the muscle, right?
Right. And the electricity doesn't directly shock it into moving either. We have to jump from an electrical process to a chemical one.
How does that happen in, like, milliseconds?
When the electrical action potential hits the very tip of the nerve, it triggers the release of a chemical neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, or ACcheck for short.
So the electrical spark acts like a detonator for a chemical spray.
A highly localized spray, yeah. There is a microscopic gap between the nerve and the muscle cell. The acetylcholine floods across that gap instantly. When it hits the surface of the muscle membrane, it binds to receptors. This causes the membrane to depolarize.
Okay, I always hear that term, depolarize. If we picture the muscle cell as a secure building, is depolarization essentially swiping the key card that unlocks the front doors?
That's a perfect way to look at it. Exactly. And once those doors are unlocked, it triggers a massive release of calcium ions that were being stored inside the muscle cell.
Calcium, like from milk.
Well, yeah, the same mineral, but used completely differently here. In the context of muscle movement, calcium is the ultimate biological key. Deep inside your muscle fibers are two distinct types of proteins called actin and myosin.
Okay, actin and myosin.
Normally, they can't interact. There are microscopic guards blocking them. But when calcium floods in, it binds to those guards and moves them out of the way.
Exposing the proteins to each other.
Yes. Now the mechanism can fire. The myosin proteins have these tiny club-like heads. Once the calcium clears the path, those myosin heads reach up, grab onto the actin proteins, and physically pull them closer together. It's basically like rowers pulling oars in a boat.
Oh, wow.
Then they release, reach further down, grab again, and pull again.
It's a microscopic ratcheting system.
Millions of these tiny protein ratchets are grabbing and pulling simultaneously inside a single muscle fiber. When they all pull together, the entire muscle physically shortens. It contracts, and your leg lifts into the air.
It is genuinely mind-blowing to visualize. A thought formed in the pilot seat of your cortex turns into an electrical signal, gets filtered for noise, crosses over the brainstem because of ancient fish evolution, races down your spine at race car speeds, triggers a chemical spray of acetylcholine, unlocks a flood of calcium, and causes millions of microscopic protein ores to physically row together.
All in the time it takes for you to casually decide to point your toe.
That is just
The sheer mechanics of it are beautiful. But if we pull back and look at the larger system, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the loop is really only half finished.
half finished, the leg moved. What else is left?
Well, the brain just sent a blind command down the spine to contract the quadriceps. But the brain is locked in a dark, silent box inside your skull. How does it know if the command actually worked? How does it know if the leg is at 90 degrees or 45 degrees, or if it accidentally kicked a heavy table and was stopped halfway?
Right, right. The pilot needs live telemetry data from the aircraft to know what the wings are actually doing.
Exactly. Controlled, graceful movement is absolutely impossible without immediate, continuous sensation. To provide that live telemetry, you have a built-in bodily GPS system. The notes highlight two highly specialized sensors working in the background: neuromuscular spindles and Golgi intent organs.
Okay, let's break down how these two work differently. The neuromuscular spindles are located inside the main belly of the muscles themselves, right?
Yeah, they are deep inside the muscle fibers. A spindle's job is to monitor the physical length of the muscle and the exact speed at which that length is changing.
So they measure stretch.
In short, yes. When the muscle gets stretched out, the spindle fires a signal back to the brain using sensory fibers that are just as fast again, up to 120 meters per second, using type I fibers as the outgoing motor signals.
So the brain knows instantly how far the muscle is extending. But what about the Golgi tendon organs? The name implies they aren't in the muscle belly at all.
Right, they sit in the tendons right at the critical junction where the soft muscle tissue attaches to the hard bone. And their job isn't to measure stretch, they measure physical tension and force using type E fibers.
So if a muscle is contracting incredibly hard, pulling against a heavy weight, the Golgi tendon organ detects that massive tension.
Yeah.
Are they functioning as like an overload sensor?
A protective overload sensor. If the tension becomes dangerously high, to the point where the muscle might literally tear itself off the bone, the Golgi tendon organ sends an urgent signal up the spine that can actually override the motor command and shut the muscle down.
Oh, wow. It causes the muscle to relax to save the joint.
Exactly. But on a regular everyday level, these two sensors, the spindle's tracking length and the Golgi organ's tracking force, are just constantly streaming data back up the spinal cord to the cerebellum and the somatosensory cortex.
Which creates this unconscious motor correction loop. The brain uses this high-speed sensory feed to constantly adjust the next motor command it's about to send down.
It's an endless, real-time conversation between the muscle and the brain.
Which perfectly explains a phenomenon that has always fascinated me. It's the reason you can walk up a flight of stairs in your house in pitch darkness without looking at your feet or stumbling.
Right.
Your conscious mind isn't manually measuring the height and distance of each individual step. Instead, your spindles and Golgi tendon organs are firing a massive stream of real-time telemetry back to your cerebellum, which adjusts your stride and balance millisecond by millisecond.
You navigate the dark through sheer automated brilliance.
But, you know, I want to push back on one piece of this machinery. As I was digging through the source material, I ran into a logical puzzle that really stumped me for a minute.
Oh, what is it?
Let's go back to our dancer.
The dancer holding the high-precision pose.
Yes. They lift their leg up to a 180-degree extension and hold it perfectly still in the air. That's an isometric hold. To keep that heavy leg up, The quadriceps muscle is contracting hard, but when a muscle contracts, it physically gets shorter.
Right, the millions of myosin proteins are pulling the actin together, shortening the tissue.
So here's the puzzle. We just established that the neuromuscular spindle is a sensor inside the muscle that measures stress. If the muscle surrounding the sensor gets shorter, shouldn't the sensor itself go completely slack?
Oh, I see where you're going.
Think of a measuring tape. If you bring the two ends closer together, the tape goes limp in the middle. It stops measuring. If the spindle goes slack the moment the muscle contracts, the GPS feed goes offline. The dancer should instantly start shaking because the brain lost its telemetry. How on earth do they hold the pose perfectly still?
That is an incredibly perceptive puzzle.
Yeah.
And it hits on one of the most elegant engineering solutions in the human body. You're entirely correct. If that spindle went slack, postural control would instantly crash. But Dr. Delong and Kinexa's notes reveal the hidden secret of high-precision movement,
Which is?
the gamma motor neuron.
The gamma. We've talked extensively about the alpha motor neuron, the massive fiber doing the heavy lifting to move the leg. What is the gamma neuron doing?
The gamma motor neuron has one specific, deeply vital job. Its sole function is to connect to tiny internal muscle fibers located inside the sensory spindle itself.
But the sensor itself has its own microscopic muscles.
It does. Which leads to a phenomenon called alpha-gamma coactivation. Let's look at the dancer again. When the pilot in their brain sends the command down the alpha motor neuron to contract the main quadriceps muscle, the brain simultaneously, in the exact same millisecond, sends a parallel signal down the gamma motor neuron.
Okay.
This parallel signal commands the tiny muscles inside the spindle to contract at the exact same rate.
Oh, that is brilliant. So as the main muscle gets shorter and shorter, the little sensor inside it actively tightens itself to reel in the slack.
It actively reels itself in. This alpha-gamma coactivation keeps the sensory spindle perfectly taut and exquisitely sensitive, no matter how short or compressed the surrounding muscle tissue gets.
That is unbelievable.
It ensures that those ultra-fast sensory fibers remain online, constantly feeding data back to the brain. This unbroken, continuously calibrated loop is the absolute secret to holding a slow, precise movement without a single visible tremor.
The body essentially built a secondary shadow motor system whose only job is to keep the sensors calibrated while the main body moves.
Precisely. And if we want to fully appreciate the dancer holding that leg in the air, we can't just look at the leg that's moving. We have to look at the invisible work happening in the supporting leg planted on the floor.
Well, yeah, because lifting a leg drastically shifts your center of gravity. Technically, the dancer should just topple over.
Exactly. While all this complex alpha-gamma coactivation is happening in the air, the supporting leg isn't just passively standing there. The obliques in the torso, along with the abductor muscles of the hip like the gluteus medius and minimus, are contracting isometrically.
So they're firing without changing length.
Right. They are generating a massive amount of continuous force. They act like biological guy wires holding up a radio tower, firing constantly to keep the trunk from tilting and the pelvis from completely dropping out from under the dancer. It's a whole-body stabilization effort orchestrated entirely in the background.
So what does this all mean for us? I mean, when we step back and look at this vast system, the pilot in the cortex, the noise-canceling basal ganglia, the evolutionary crossover at the brainstem, the chemical unlocking of calcium, the microscopic protein ores pulling together, and the brilliantly engineered alpha-gamma loop keeping the telemetry online, what are we left with?
It's a lot to take in.
It is. It means that every single time you casually reach out for a glass of water, you are initiating a superhighway of neurological and chemical events. It is a flawless, high-speed feedback loop working in perfect harmony, operating entirely without a single ounce of your conscious input.
Is the ultimate invisible machinery. And understanding just how beautifully automated it is raises a really provocative question, something to perhaps rethink how we approach physical skills.
Oh, I like where this is going.
If all of this extraordinary coordination, this perfect balance of tension and real-time telemetry, evolved to happen entirely below the level of our conscious awareness, what happens when we do try to consciously micromanage it?
Like when a professional golfer suddenly gets the yips and forgets how to swing a club. Or when you overthink a familiar dance step and trip over your own feet.
Precisely. By focusing too intensely on the mechanical position of our bodies, do we disrupt this perfect high-speed loop? Are we essentially throwing a conscious wrench into an unconsciously brilliant gear system?
That's a great point.
It makes you wonder if the true secret to mastering a physical skill isn't forcing your body to learn the movements, but rather training your conscious mind to step back and simply let the machinery run the way it was designed to.
Are we breaking the machine by looking too closely at it? That is a wild thought, and definitely something I'm going to be pondering the next time I try to learn a new sport or skill. I want to thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden world of movement. The next time you take a simple step, take a second to appreciate the lightning-fast race cars zooming down your spine, the ancient evolutionary wiring, and the microscopic ratchets making it all possible. Catch you on the next one.